Hey there, welcome to Takeaway with Sam Oches, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Sam Oches, editor-in-chief here at NRN, and this is the show where I give you an all-access pass to the restaurant industry's most influential decision-makers. This week, I'm talking with Seth Berkowitz, the founder and CEO of Insomnia Cookies, the cookie delivery concept that has been around now for 22 years and has grown to more than 300 locations in the U.S., helping to carve out an early niche in the so-called indulgence category that's been booming the past few years. Just last week, in fact, the day that Seth and I spoke, Insomnia announced that two investors had stepped in to acquire the majority stake previously owned by Krispy Kreme, a move that the brand thinks could open the doors to another 1,000+ units over the next decade. Seth joined the podcast to talk about the brand's evolution in its first 2 decades, including why the introduction of Apple's first iPhone was even more pivotal to the brand than the introduction of third-party delivery, plus how the past 7 years under Krispy Kreme's ownership helped solidify Insomnia's corporate structure, but why it was time for both brands to go their separate ways. In this interview, you will learn more about why tapping into customer emotions is a surefire way to build trust and loyalty, why consistency and reliability are better at building a sustainable business than novelty, and why investors should not be seen as a capital partner alone. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to Takeaway on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please also leave your feedback on those platforms, as it is a great way to share this show with new listeners. You can also follow me online where I am most active, which would be LinkedIn, as well as on TikTok, where I am at Takeaway Sam. That is at Takeaway Sam. Jumping now into my interview with Insomnia Cookies' Seth Berkowitz. Also, don't forget to stick around after the interview, as I will share my 5 takeaways from this discussion, actionable insights that you can take with you on the go. Okay, I'm sitting down with Seth Berkowitz, the founder and CEO of Insomnia Cookies. Seth, thanks for taking some time today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Seth. So, cookies is one of my favorite subjects, and certainly one of the favorite subjects of my children. I am familiar with Insomnia. I've been a customer before. There was an Insomnia in my college town of Athens, Ohio, a home of Ohio University, where I got acquainted with it. But I want to dig back a little bit deeper into the origin story of Insomnia Cookies, and then kind of walk that up to the opportunity that exists today for Insomnia. So let's take me back to 2003 when you started this business. What was the impetus? How did you see the opportunity in cookies?
So I lived in this great college house with 8 of my very close friends, and it was a late night house. We played video games. I watched a bunch of Super Bowls and World Series. I remember all these fun times we had together. It was always all hours of the night. And in 2003, there was 3 options for delivery after midnight. It was Papa John's, it was Allegro's Pizza, it was Lee's Hoagie House. Those were our 3 options, as I recall. And so I wasn't good at video games, by the way. I would play, I'd lose. And so the doorbell would ring, and inevitably I was the guy grabbing the door. And one day it rings, and I open the door, and I'm like, God, I think this is the same delivery guy I've seen 2 or 3 times from Papa John's. And I just was so frustrated. I walked into the living room where 8 of them were hanging out. I remember slam the pizza box on the table. I don't know, just to emphasize how frustrated I was. We need something different. We need to try something different. This is so frustrating. And they're like, go walk over to Wawa. It's 6 blocks away. And I look outside and it's snowing. And I was like, that's a great plan, but it's 1 a.m. in Philly in February and it's snowing. And so how cool would it be if somebody delivered something warm and delicious right here to the door that was different, a craving that I always had, this sweet craving. And they're like, yeah, that would be great. But meanwhile, it's your turn. Why don't you sit down and let's play Halo? And I was like, no, that is a really interesting idea. It sparked the beginnings of the brand. And in some ways, Insomnia was kind of founded in that moment.
That's amazing. I mean, especially to put in context, this is years before DoorDash. This is at a time when delivery was almost exclusively the realm of pizza and Chinese food. So this idea of delivering cookies, I mean, you didn't have a model really for what to build that on. And frankly, a cookie business at all. Nobody had really built a cookie chain. So how did you, come up with this fact that you could make cookies, make it a viable business, and deliver it? How did you get that off the ground?
I think there's a part about it. I always go back to this, and it's interesting. I'm sitting here today at our 14th Insomnia Cookies annual summit. There's 350 managers about 50 feet away from me. And so we're talking so much about the emotionality, the trust that we built with our community. And in my mind, like so much of it goes back to I'm 20 years old in college. And there's this emotional moment of like, I'm away from home for the first time ever. But like I'm only a few years away from adulthood. And like, what's something that would really comfort me and be delicious? And something that came to mind was a warm cookie, right? Something that you'd have in your house growing up. And so that part was really driven through kind of that age where I was at kind of inflection point in my life. So I was committed to this idea, not just of a product, but something warm. And the only way to execute on that was go as fast as I possibly could. And so like that was the scaffolding, the building blocks of the business. But how to actually make it happen, especially in 2003, when there was like truly no infrastructure, required like muscling through it. Like I would drive and go pick up flour and sugar and butter from King of Prussia Mall at the Costco. I think it was Costco. I mean, it's like BJ's or whichever one I was using at the time. And then I would drive around campus through all hours of the night. So it was very early days. There was minimal technological support. It's certainly, it was the early days of muscling, I'd say.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so college towns became kind of your bread and butter, right? You guys really use college towns as this growth vehicle. I mean, obviously, college students up late, insomnia, fits that sort of insomnia mentality. I think I average probably 2 or 3 hours of sleep in college, right? Cookies sound great in the middle of the night. But I imagine too, college towns were great for finding your workforce, the delivery drivers. But you tell me, why were college towns such a great fit for insomnia?
I mean, in some regard, it was helpful to find like the right captive audience, right? They're there. They shared what you just described, this late night mentality. It all made a lot of sense. And also that kind of inflection point, that comforting moment I was mentioning was transferable, right? My peers felt very similarly. Like the second I started putting cookies kind of into their hands, handing out flyers, we got a newspaper article written up about us. All of a sudden it went from 2-3 deliveries a night to 50, 60. So it clearly resonated. The part that was a struggle was college campus life is very short, right? It's like 3 months and then a break, and then 4 months and then a break. And then the summer break is incredibly long. And so the business was a little lumpy, I'd say, to start, but it was the most resonant and it was the most shareable, right? It was like the early days of social media. The college student loved the product. They would talk about the product. They'd share it with their friends. It really reduced our marketing spend. And it was a very obvious early course for us.
As this thing took off, I mean, as insomnia starts to grow, what was product innovation like? Because I mean, again, cookies, something everybody loves, but you don't have a blueprint for how you should scale a cookie business and how you can market that and how you can do product innovation. So what was the product innovation piece specifically like as insomnia grew?
The early days, it was really wide. Like Insomnia was fully customizable. I had a couple of different doughs and you could throw in all sorts of mix-ins, but it was operationally inefficient. Like I was struggling to deliver quickly. And I learned very fast that make sure it's not just quality, but that could be quality the moment that you eat it at your door. So I had to engineer back from 25-minute delivery times to the kitchen to make sure that product we were executing on was going to be delicious when we delivered it to them. So that was kind of how I thought about innovation early days. It wasn't, how wide can I go here? It was, how can I make sure that warm, delicious delivered essence is true in every bite?
I imagine then DoorDash and third-party delivery comes on the scene, and I mean, I guess we're still 15 years away from that. I mean, it took a long time for that to come on the scene. But technology, at least, right? I mean, mobile ordering. What were some of the sort of inflection points, I guess, for the insomnia business that sort of muscled it up a little bit?
I mean, the biggest one is the iPhone release. Like when iPhone goes live, everything changes for us. But I'd say within a year or two, we had our own website. We worked with Campus Food at the time, which got bought by Seamless Grubhub. We were trying to leverage technology. Like we always bought we had like walkie-talkies early on. Like we were trying desperately to find like these edges through technology that was certainly evolving around us. But it wasn't until like we were I'd say a late night indulgence, a really incredible convenience brand that nobody thought of like in the early years. We had to continue to educate every single time we entered a market. We say, you need a late night cookie. I promise you, the second you have it, you will love it. You'll order again. And like, I don't know. Trial's going to take some real work. Once the iPhone hit, we were an on-demand brand in an on-demand universe. And it just transitioned everything. It shifted our mentality, it accelerated our growth, and off to the races we went.
And then again, with Facebook and Twitter in the early days of social media, more social media starts to come out. College students especially, they go to other college towns to visit their friends or their siblings. And I mean, I imagine word of mouth from college students became really powerful for you.
It always has been, and it continues to be that way. I mean, we opened stores in the last few months in locations that felt like they were a little bit outside of our wheelhouse, 150 miles from locations bakeries we currently have. And we flipped on the lights, turned on the oven, and lines just show up out the door because everybody at this point in a collegiate town knows Insomnia. It had been built around college. It's now growing into cities, into suburbs, and beyond. The brand has really resonated much more across platforms than it did originally. But the college student is the shareable viral. They are our core.
Yeah. Okay. So again, when I think so much of all of this, I think so much about how you were 15, 20 years ahead of multiple things. I mean, you were ahead of delivery. You were ahead of the cookie treat space that now, of course, is more saturated. And you were ahead of social media in that, like, you have such a visual product, shares so well on social media that, like, yes, Facebook and Twitter, but now with Instagram and TikTok, again, all of these things start to hit 15 years into business for you that I imagine were pretty advantageous. And if we took them just kind of one by one, the third-party delivery, was that a boon for you? Did you just flip that on and you're off to the races? Or was that a little weird coming from a company that already has a delivery infrastructure? And was it a weird transition, I guess?
It was complicated. I mean, first of all, I believe our brand moments, the opportunity to put a cookie in somebody's hand and control that, is the reason Insomnia is a wonderful and growing opportunity for everybody in this company. Like, it is, when we deliver ourselves, when we use our courier system and we deliver in 25 minutes, it wows our insomniacs and they order again. When you use third party, there's more variability, right? There's things to be worried about. So we've tried to be strategic about it, take advantage of this kind of growing landscape. But I'm almost rigid as it relates to delivery to make sure that we control that moment. That is what makes us who we are.
Yeah. So then with social media like TikTok and Instagram, have you seen a lot more demand, especially among younger consumers always being really, I imagine, your wheelhouse, but do these provide new channels for you to reach younger audiences or to at least adjust your marketing to where this is a much more visual game? How have you approached channels like Instagram and TikTok?
I would say Insomnia is a very shareable product, and when like you show the product melting because it's warm, right? Insomnia is a warm product. That is how it has to be eaten. That is the only way to eat it. Mm-hmm. And so when we're able to share the warmth and break the cookie open and the gooiness of the cookie and the meltiness of the ice cream, it just shows so beautifully on the page. Leverage that with the actual quality of the product, and Insomnia not only tastes great, it looks great. And so when we marry those two, the marketing edge is through the roof, right? But I think sometimes we've ended up being a little bit flatter because we're showing our pizza box, which is super iconic, and the product, when it's shown flat, not broken, it can be a little bit less appealing. And so we've tried to drive that forward much more clearly to make sure that we're talking about the craving, right? People are craving something warm and melty and delicious, and we just need to inspire that, kind of that feeling.
Okay, so let's talk about cookies as a category because, of course, the last 5-6 years, we've seen competitors spring up. Of course, Crumble being chief among competitors. There's others out there too. But I'm curious how you view the growth of a company, of a competitor, in that, is this validation for you? And what does that change for Insomnia when suddenly you have other competitors doing what you've been doing now for many, many years? And consumers, in some ways I can see that as could be an opportunity because consumers are suddenly thinking about cookies as a purchase they make outside the home. But how did you see it? How would you view the rise in these competitors?
It's been an interesting experience to watch. I'll say, so Insomnia, it's like a long game business, right? We've been at this multi-decades. We've watched the cupcake craze come and go, right? We watched frozen yogurt come and go, tremendous amount of excitement in ice cream. And so there's these ebbs and flows in indulgence. But the cookie category has exploded, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And we certainly have benefited from it. I mean, there's been a lot of thought around it. There's been lots of discussion about it. But we're very, very differentiated, right? Late night brand, right? Delivery, true engineering behind that. Insomnia is built to deliver so effectively. There's warmth around the product. So as you know, I went back to this, like I said this a couple minutes ago, for us, it's so critical to both taste good and look good. But for us, it's making sure we optimize that moment. And it's kept us somewhat separate from the fray, right? There's been lots of conversations around giant cookies, tons of toppings on top of it, right? For us, it's classics, it's consistency, it's comfort. There's specialness to that essence. And it keeps us super relevant. And so we're growing faster than we ever have before. Performance is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And we as Insomniacs, our culture is as connected as, as since day one, really.
I have a hunch too that, let's just talk about Crumble for a second, which is to say that a lot of what they've done has been to drive trial. There's been, the sort of weekly flavor drops, the pink boxes, social media, et cetera, et cetera. I know a lot of people who hear about it and try it. I haven't heard of a ton of conversion when it comes to Crumble. In that, I know a lot of people who have tried it and said, "Yep, okay, well, been there." And for you, when you talk about this long game, it seems to me like you must have such loyalty among customers. Obviously, those folks who are coming out of college, but then, have you harnessed that relationship you have with guests in a way to drive loyalty in a day and age, especially where people are driving trial, but may not be able to go that next level like you are?
Well, I think there's a lot goes back to the founding moment, right? There's that craving of something warm and delicious. So there's an emotional connection to creating a comforting moment, like really providing them with something that sparks just a little bit of joy. But then when we execute on it, it leads to tremendous, tremendous frequency. And so we've looked at that and we said, all right, well, you're a college student, right? You spend 4 years in college. We've hooked you. You love Insomnia. You've used it, hopefully walked into our stores or ordered delivery, shared it with friends, right? There's all these use cases that have worked for you. And now you graduate and you move to a major city in all likelihood. We have stores there. All right. So we create a nostalgic moment. And then you spend a couple of years in a major city and maybe you get married, have kids, move to the suburbs. And now Insomnia is starting to put our bakeries in those markets. So we're leveraging the lifelong journey of our Insomniacs, but it really gets sparked at such an early day. And it allows us to maintain massive frequency. And so that's what we see. Like Insomnia, I say it's a classics business with tremendous repeatability because that reliability, that consistency is what everybody has learned to trust.
Have you been able to leverage data to track that customer journey? Because it's so cool that you get them at such a young age and track them through having a family, sharing cookies with their kids. Does data help you build on that?
It does. I mean, it's also like creates this virtuous loop, right? Because after people move into the suburbs, potentially have children, they introduce them to the brand even earlier. And so this intro starts now 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever age before college. And we see that the journey continues. But yes, I mean, we can, harness as much data as possible to really watch the journey through. And that part's incredibly fun. Like having 20-year Insomniac fans is a pretty special thing to have.
Well, and theoretically, you could have the kids of Insomnia college students going to college themselves now, right?
My kids are fans, right? So I was the first Insomniacs.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about growth because you have some news today as we speak, news about to come out about Insomnia's growth, which I'll get to in a second. But 300 locations, 300 plus locations open today. What challenges have you faced in getting to that number? Because, when I think about the last 22, 23 years, obviously you have the recession that happened in the midst of that. You've had lots of political everything, lots of economic everything. There's, the restaurant industry is a constant roller coaster and everything ebbs and flows, pendulum that swings. What were some of the primary challenges, though, that you saw over the course of 22 years that stood in your way to this 300 unit number? And how were you overcoming those challenges?
And there's so much difficulty locking in the right format. When I started the business, we had basically ghost kitchens before there were ghost kitchens. We tried co-op models with a frozen yogurt brand. We had 15 food trucks at one point. And then finally, in like 08, 09, we settled on a brick and mortar model with delivery attached, right? Really making sure there's this, I call this rubber band effect, where you have retail and delivery, the consumer enjoys it in store, they go home, like, I love that cookie, and they order it to their home, and it just kind of circles through. And like, took us a little while to get there. But when we finally found something that was working, all of a sudden the financial universe like falls apart on us. So 2009, 2010, 2011, just the most difficult couple of years we've had at Insomnia. And at that time, I had to shrink down my team. I was traveling around the country. It was trying, to say the least. And but at the end of the day, we pushed through it. We got to critical mass right around 2012, store 23, 24 in Kent, Ohio. Remember, not only did we break even, we were able to pay for the next store through cash flow. So like, kind of felt like we could self-generate Insomnia. And store 24 to 146, we built over the next 5 years. And so really, like your question, like where were the challenges? It was just finding almost like market fit at the end of the day. There was excitement around it. It did work on college campuses, but it was a short academic calendar, so we couldn't really optimize the year. And we just had to kind of scale into the right level of momentum that we got into about 8 years after I launched.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned food trucks, you mentioned virtual brands, and these are things that, are still here and serve a place. But, when I think of the restaurant industry, of course, it's so driven by trends, and people get kind of starry eyed about some of these new things, and they pursue it, and only for it to, sometimes bubbles burst, or sometimes customers just kind of move on to the next thing. So when I think about how you talk about Insomnia as a long game, and it's about kind of having that sustainable business model, I imagine you must have to resist a lot of trends, and especially considering the intention on cookies now. You could make some knee-jerk reactions to that, but that wouldn't serve you in the long run. How do you maintain that? How do you resist some of these trends that come up and ensure that you just keep Insomnia on the straight and narrow?
I mean, I focus on our ethos. I always go back to, why does this exist in the first place, right? It exists because I wanted something warm, delicious, delivered to me through all hours of the night. So first, does it fit into that framework? Second, we try to be super cookie forward, right? We want to make sure when we launch something that it's within the confines of cookies. So we launched a proprietary ice cream a few years ago that has our cookies threaded through it. And it's remarkable. Big growing part of our platform. It's an amazing product, but always cookie forward. And as we think about innovation, that's really where our minds go. And so we're disciplined. Like, we know who we are. We know which parts of the brand we need to work on. We know which parts of the brand our insomniacs truly love. And we try not to get distracted. And having multi-decade experience, I know not to fall too deeply into trends, even if it's really difficult. Even if people ask me about new brands every waking hour, right? It's about being who we are and why we exist in the first place. And that's kept us really moving. It's been the engine for many, many years now.
Okay, to set up today's news, you guys did receive an investment from Krispy Kreme to really rev up growth. Tell me about that deal and what that did for Insomnia.
So the kind of the backstory there is, I had been running Insomnia like over a decade at that point, and I had a great group of angel investors who'd been in the business, and we reached roughly 150 locations. And I had reached the point personally where I felt like I was struggling to develop as a leader. Like, I'm such a founder through and through. Like, I go after everything. I'm so passionate about the brand. I push my people. Even with that love and spirit, and still to today. But I don't know if I had kind of that CEO really, capability, honestly, at the end of the day. Like, I would put everything on my shoulders and go. And I recognized that limitation. It was really clearly an issue for us. And I love what I do. And I wanted to keep doing what I do. And I was looking for a mentor. And so we ran a process. We met a bunch of different companies. Krispy Kreme was the first one that we met in the entire process in February of 2017. And ultimately, they acquired us. They bought 3/4 of the business in 2018. And they helped me really rethink the business in a more brand-oriented way, really to codify what makes us great. And then a lot of the words I talk about today, understanding our essence and our purpose, it helps bring everybody together in this organization. But it also helped me to be a better, really a better leader. And so it was a great choice for us back 7 years ago.
So then I imagine obviously also helps you to really step on the accelerator for growth. But here we are, 2025, and today's news is that you have other investment partners who are buying out the Krispy Kreme stake. Tell me about the details of this. I guess first off, what does this mean for Insomnia as far as who's going to be backing this company going forward?
So, I mean, when Krispy Kreme acquired us, they had a couple of priorities. One, they wanted to build out their digital ecosystem. They wanted digital to become more of a backbone of their brand, and something we've had. It's really truly part of our DNA. And they were focused on international and really growing out their domestic opportunity that was in front of them. And a few years later, they went public. And so from there, they kind of shifted strategy. They focused more on this daily fresh delivery business. And so we were so connected. They were a hot light business. We were a warm, delicious delivery business. We were focused on digital, domestic rollout, thinking about international. And it all was like going really nicely. And they just kind of shifted their approach a few years back. And so there became this like natural, kind of almost natural need to unwind the two businesses and put us in a position to focus on Insomnia. And Insomnia has a lot in front of us. Right? We have 1,500 locations we still anticipate opening in the U.S. in all sorts of formats, from suburbs to sports arenas, transit opportunities, tourist locations. Right? There's so much we're seeing working at Insomnia, and we want to be focused on who we are. And not to mention they're a public company, right? So they're focused on the quarter. And so just the elements that made us really mesh well started to kind of unwind naturally. And so it really led to a need to separate the businesses about a year ago. And we brought in two great partners, one Mistral Equity Partners, whose founder was basically our chairman of the board for 10 years before Krispy Kreme bought us. So he came back into the business, a very close friend of mine. And they introduced us to Verlinvest, which is a family office of InBev, based in Belgium. And we have two wonderful partners who are committed to the long-term journey of Insomnia, who want us to do what's right for our business and really see it through.
I speak with a lot of emerging brands, and finding that right financial partner is such a big part of the journey. And I know a lot of people who made incredible decisions. They felt very happy about partners that were with them for the long haul. And I know others who made a bad decision, and for whatever reason, the partnership just didn't work out. What are the qualities you were looking for when it became known that you and Krispy Kreme would go your separate ways? What did you want in the partner that would help take Insomnia to the next level?
So, I mean, we sit in a very interesting spot because Insomnia is a self-perpetuating business, right? It's highly profitable, growing rapidly, top line and bottom line. We build stores through cash flow and have done so for over a decade, right? So the partnership needs to be value added, right? We want to bring in partners who've seen what we're going to see, who can help us connect with talent, help us connect with potential board members who've had the experience that we're looking for. The capital, it's here, right? That's not what we're seeking, right? We're looking for continued mentorship, continued development, and making sure that we hit our goals, right? We're an ambitious company, and you need ambitious partners to get you there.
Yeah. You mentioned this number of 1,500 locations, and you mentioned all of the various sort of properties that you could fit an Insomnia into, which sounds totally right to me. Why is that your goal? I mean, for a company that for 23 years has been sort of slow and steady to get to 300, why do you think now is the time to really kind of race to that number you've identified?
We have kind of a testing mentality, Insomnia. We will, and in a lot of ways what makes us comfortable moving fast when we go fast. But like, we've tested out, like, we know college works, right? We know city works. They've been very successful, more than 100 locations each. We didn't know what to make of tourists. We didn't know what to make of transportation or suburbs. And over the course of the last year or two, we've really tested out these formats, and they're very successful. And so once you open the aperture into 6 or 7 different formats versus the 2 that we've had to date, all of a sudden 1,800 stores appears, right? Because there are demographics and characteristics of these locations and neighborhoods that we can really quickly align on. And that it's not giving us confidence. We understand this is the opportunity now, and we want to go make it happen.
When I think of the state of the restaurant industry, and I think of some of the trends that are out there today. And you've mentioned some of the trends that have come and gone, but obviously, as we've said, there are trends that come here and really stay. And if I think of one in particular, it's this the drive-through coffee space, the Dutch Bros and Seven Brews and Scooters of the world. But what I sort of really helped, I think, consolidate around is this idea that the consumer is on the go a lot. They are eating and drinking at all hours of the day. That the traditional day parts have kind of been sort of blown apart, and that there is a lot more interest in an indulgent snack, an indulgent treat. I mean, that's what their beverages are, a little bit more, less of the drip coffee in the morning, more of that indulgent pick me up in the afternoon. That to me seems like it puts Insomnia in a great place, because if that's where the American consumer is going, then that means they're going to really want cookies as well to be a part of that journey. Does that track with you? How much do you think that this sort of trend or the state of the industry and where it's going really is that, gives that assist to Insomnia?
It's funny because we've been here being an indulgent brand, daytime, like late night, starting at 6, 7 o'clock. That's when we get going, right? So later in day indulgence is something that, in a lot of ways we've created in this country, but not in the beverage category. And so seeing that it is certainly more of a proof point that is where, the tastes are going, where the trends are going. And it gives us confidence, but I'll say this long game piece for me is so important, right? Insomnia is about endurance, durability, living through all of the various trends, but being true to who we are and making sure that our relevance is always at the top. Because that is what's made us successful, and that's what I believe will continue to make us successful.
Well, it's really interesting because if I think of that beverage trend in particular, McDonald's believed in it so much they opened Cosmics for about a year, learned as much as they needed to from it, and then I'm sure they're going back to their test lab and are going to come up with a big beverage line that we'll see probably later this year. Similarly, McDonald's also partnered with Krispy Kreme, and we saw what has been going on with that. But I guess what that leads me to wonder is, you could also really activate partnerships in a unique way. Is that something you've considered, or do you think that could ever be a part of the growth, is partnering with other, even if it's supermarkets and other retail shops, to get Insomnia to more people?
It's something we've thought about. There's certainly you want to widen the opportunity. You can go after all sorts of boxes, right? But I think for us, it's making sure we can control that moment, right? Make sure that the warmth and deliciousness is there. But partnerships is certainly something we've thought about bringing into the bakeries over time. And it's just a matter of finding that right moment to do it.
Okay, Seth, last question for you. So take me back to 2003, Philadelphia. You're playing Halo with your friends. If you knew what you know now, what are the lessons you wish you had shared with that version of you back then? What are lessons you would share to young founders today that you've learned over these 20 plus years?
Man, there's so much, right? I made endless mistakes. The kind of, in some ways, the biggest one is not trusting in the basics of the idea, right? Insomnia was a late night delivery business trying to reimagine what cookies were in America. And yet I did frozen yogurt and trucks and all sorts of things that weren't true to that. Like really saying, okay, Mrs. Fields and Great American Cookie, they're not working because they're in malls, doesn't mean that retail cookies plus delivery isn't going to work. And so diving into that with a little bit more audaciousness, I think would have been a really good move and saved me 5 to 7 years of pain. But honestly, I forged, we kind of forged the whole business through the pain, really understanding that persistence was key to who we were. And so I wouldn't change any of it, but there's certainly a lot I've learned and willing to impart to others.
Great lessons. Seth Berkowitz, the founder of Insomnia Cookies. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Seth, and congrats on the new deal.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
That was my interview with Insomnia Cookies' Seth Berkowitz. So what should you learn from this interview? Here are my 5 takeaways. My first takeaway is that tapping into customer emotions is a surefire way to build trust and loyalty. Seth described that day when he first came up with the idea of launching Insomnia Cookies. It was a place and time that I remember very, very well. Being in college, hanging out with your friends, awake late at night, playing video games, and you're hungry, and all you want is a certain specific kind of food. And for Seth, on that night back in 2003, he had this craving for a cookie, a warm cookie, something that he had grown up eating that brings comfort. And that is an emotional experience. When you crave something that is comforting, something that you've grown up with, something that has memories attached to it, there is emotion there. And restaurants' ability to tap into that emotion is key to building a trust with them. And building trust with them is how you get their loyalty. This is the entire premise that Insomnia Cookies has had over the past 22 years, which is to provide something that brings emotional nostalgia, something that taps into emotion. And by doing that, they build trust and therefore loyalty. My second takeaway is that college students are the perfect foundation for the indulgence category. So talking about the indulgence category, first off, of course, we're talking about cookies, ice cream, treats, donuts. Anything in this category is really seen as something you might, of course, order as a snack or an indulgence, a dessert. Cookies, especially over the past several years, have been key to that indulgence category. And Insomnia proved early on that college towns could be a great place to jumpstart a brand like this. Now, why college towns? You might be listening to this and you might have experienced growth in college towns and know all about this. There's a reason why you see a lot of specific brands thriving in college towns. And that is because, of course, college students have specific tastes. They eat at all hours of the day, but especially late at night. They like indulgent foods. They are maybe not counting calories quite as much as older folks might be. But I love how Seth really got into it a little bit further. He talked about how, college students are the, key to virality, right? Going viral. They are the key to shareability. College students love to share things with their friends, whether they're sharing them on social media or obviously in Insomnia Cookies' early days, sharing them word of mouth. They're also often congregating together at parties or events or just hanging out with each other, playing video games, whatever it might be. So college towns are this great place. And that's why I say they're a great foundation for the indulgence category especially, is because these great, emotional, delicious, indulgent items resonate with students who, for a lot of them, are living away from home for the first time, maybe miss home, maybe are stressed out, but they are together, they have each other, and they want that thing that they can share with each other. So college town's perfect for that. Now, caveat, if you know anything about college towns, I have lived in a college town literally my entire life, and I can tell you that the biggest weakness of a college town, especially the one I grew up in, is it's deserted for about 3 or 4 months out of the year. So big red flag. It's not for everybody. But if you can figure out how to have a business essentially 8 or 9 months out of the year and still be profitable, that potential in the college student is so strong and builds that early relationship that Seth said, these people over 22 years, these college students, those early students who had insomnia, they've grown up and had kids and are sharing Insomnia Cookies with their own kids. Those kids now, some of them are even old enough to go to college and experience maybe an Insomnia Cookies in their own college town as well. That's a special relationship. So again, that's where college towns are really key. Last thing I'll say about college towns. College students, by and large, graduate and leave, and they go out into the world, into cities and suburbs. And we've seen time and time again that brands started in college towns or that, early on, mostly expanded in college towns. That becomes key to your further growth, which is potential franchisees, operators, managers who live in that town, go to school in that town, fall in love with the brand, and then, take it to another community. Or simply, when you move into a new town, you have this base of potential customers who remember your brand from when they were in college. So anyway, I could go on and on. Obviously, I know a lot about college towns. I could go on and on about it. But just know that this is a great place, a great destination, great market for certain kinds of brands. My third takeaway is that consistency and reliability are better at building a sustainable business than novelty. So, we of course danced around this idea, Seth and I, about the competition and what's going on in the cookie space right now. And Seth made it very clear, what he is committed to with Insomnia Cookies is not providing some gigantic, over-the-top, flashy cookie. He wants to provide delicious cookies consistently. He wants the Insomnia Cookie and the Insomnia experience to be a reliable experience that people can trust. He wants the delivery process to be effective and work exactly as it should. These are all factors that done over and over and over again, it can build a sustainable long-term business because people keep coming back to it. Novelty has its place, as I'll talk about here in a little bit. It can get people's attention and certainly pops on social media. But novelty does not always build that trust, that relationship. It doesn't always come, consistently or with reliability, and therefore struggles to be a long-term kind of thing. And this was a theme throughout the interview. You might have noticed Seth continued to talk about, durability, persistence, reliability, consistency. These are all factors that are so admirable in a business and easy to forget about today in an age of things going viral and an age of novelty. Remember, at the end of the day, you need to provide a delicious, high-quality product consistently and be a reliable business so that people will come back and you can drive that frequency and loyalty. My fourth takeaway related to that is that you shouldn't be afraid to pursue trends, but never stray from your core brand identity. I love this, being able to look at Insomnia kind of with this comprehensive look at its 22 years and what has happened in those 22 years for a brand that is, late night delivery cookies. All of these things kind of check a lot of boxes for trends that have come and gone. But also, you had the recession in those 22 years. You had, again, the first iPhone showed up, third-party delivery showed up, ghost kitchens, food trucks, a lot of these things that Insomnia Cookies, it experienced, it played around with, it, tried to incorporate into the model. And so, but, Seth said really like at the end of the day, what's been key to Insomnia's growth is you don't fall too hard for those trends. You don't get distracted by things that, kind of pop up and become buzzy. You stick to your brand ethos. And for Insomnia Cookies, that has been, again, that, reliability, consistency, that high quality product. Seth says it's always been cookie forward. So it doesn't want to get distracted by other ancillary products. And that relevance, with the customer and that durability as a business have been so key. And so, again, just to say, trends that come and go, it's not a bad thing to see how it might fit into your business. But when it becomes a bad thing to chase a trend is when you give up on your brand foundation, your brand ethos, your core model that got you successful in the first place. So keep that in mind as you start to look into new trends that you might want to explore for your own business. My fifth and final takeaway is that investors should not be seen as a capital provider alone. So the big news and why I was speaking with Seth last week was because that day we spoke, they announced that the stake that Krispy Kreme has owned for the past 7 years has now been acquired by these two other investors, a majority stake in Insomnia Cookies. These two investment partners that are going to help unlock this potential that Seth explained in Insomnia and getting it to potentially 1,800 locations that they see as kind of being the ceiling for this brand. And, I love the honesty and transparency with which Seth talked about the relationship with Krispy Kreme, because, here are two brands that are deciding to go their own ways, but they spent 7 years together, and it really helped mature Insomnia as a brand, as Seth said. But, he pointed out that, he got this investment, this majority stake from Krispy Kreme. And, that, of course, you can step on the accelerator and grow quickly with a partner like that. But what he said he really wanted was to help solidify the business model. He really needed to codify it, was how he explained it. He wanted some structure, some infrastructure to the business that, he didn't quite have in building it himself. He needed someone to be a CEO where he could be a founder. And now with their new investors, as he explained, he wants people who can come in and provide mentorship and guidance and help to recruit leaders and help bring on board members. The point is that when you get an investor or, a parent company comes in and acquires you, these are great things from a capital standpoint. These help unlock lots of growth doors purely from that financial capital standpoint. But that's not the only thing these partners can provide. They can provide guidance, wisdom. They can provide just human capital. They can provide, a path forward and infrastructure that can help you become a more viable business. So that's how, if you're an emerging brand out there looking for capital, looking for a partner to help you grow, consider that there's a lot more that you want from that partner than money alone. And so somebody who shows up and wants to write you a check, if that's all they're going to provide for you, think twice, because there's a lot more attributes that you're going to want out of them than simply that check. Those are all my takeaways for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to Takeaway wherever you listen to podcasts and leave your feedback. You can also email me at sam.oches@informa.com. Thanks again and talk to you next week.